One night, um, I end up it happened, um, but this time what was different was I quit breathing, but it wasn't like I couldn't catch my breath. I didn't need to breathe. It's like my lungs no longer existed. There was no need to breathe. There was no use for lungs. It was like I was having an out of body experience. But it was freaking me out because I didn't understand it. I was scared. I didn't understand anything. So a few years ago, I was becoming hyper religious, I would say. And I mean that in the strictest sense of the words. I was trying to become biblican. Like I use the word biblican, trying to follow the word of what the Bible tells you to do. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I can remember that now that I was doing that, but at the time I didn't think I was doing that. But I remember now that because I remember a buddy of mine who was an atheist. He says he was an atheist, but now I don't believe he was an atheist. He's Gnostic, which means knowledge. He just believes that there's something out there. He just doesn't know what it is. But I remember he asked me to watch this video called Zeitgeist, and I couldn't watch it because it was questioning the birth of Jesus, and I couldn't watch it. And that's how I knew I was the position I was in at that time. I couldn't question anything about Christianity. It made me nauseous. And that was the place I was in. I didn't want to hear anything that was like that. It was wrong. And when you're in a position like that, you don't really actually have faith. You don't. You have fear. You're scared. And I was grabbing onto something. I was wanting to believe. And I was grabbing a hold of it really quickly, really strong. I was wanting to believe so hard. And one day, I remember, it actually probably started a week before. Let's back up a week before, because I was at the gym and I was working out, and all of a sudden I started getting dizzy, and I started losing my vision, and I ended up driving home like an idiot. But I got myself home, and I had my wife take me to the hospital. And this was at the beginning of COVID, the whole scare then. And my wife takes me to takes me to the St. John's, to the hospital, the ER, urgent care. And they, I had a mask on, but the mask said, worn by force, not by fear. And we thought I was stroking out, and they refused to see me until I switched the mask to something else. And then she hands me paperwork to fill out. And mind you, I'm having what we believe I was having a stroke. Fill out this paperwork. and an hour later gets me to the back. There's only one person in the whole waiting room. And I get to the back, and the woman comes up to me and she says, I got to do a COVID test on you first. And I said, the hell you are. And she says, well, I'm going to do one anyway. And she goes to stick it up my nose, and I grab her wrist and I pulled it out. And I said, no, you're not. And I said, you have no right to do one. But then they ended up doing an x-ray of my chest and everything, and finally test me for other things. After they do that, because she got it up my nose part of the way and stuff, but they tested for COVID before they tested for the stroke. But they said, well, you don't have a stroke. But they didn't care about the stroke. They cared about COVID, because that's how smart hospitals are, and the government is. But regardless, I didn't have COVID, and I didn't have a stroke either. But they didn't know what was wrong with me. They couldn't figure out what was wrong, and they didn't know at that time at all. They couldn't figure it out because nothing was wrong. Well, a week later, I go to lay down, and at my house, and I wake up, and suddenly the left side of my body starts convulsing, and this, in my mind's eye, like this greenish purplish color in my brain, I see something moving, and I just instantly start praying that it goes away, and it stops for like a couple of seconds, and then it starts again, and then I pray and it stops, and I wake my wife up and I ask her, I'm like, honey, please pray or something, and I started getting like instant information was starting to, like, downloads of information was coming to my head, but everything was scaring me. I mean, it was scaring the piss out of me. I didn't know what was going on. But I was just getting, like, my body was convulsing. But it wasn't a convulsion. It was more like vibrating. But what was weird was my wife said, looking at me, nothing was happening. Like, absolutely nothing was happening. Only I could tell my body was convulsing. And to her, it was just, I was just sitting still. But to me, I was vibrating. And I go, and after she wakes up and she prays, nothing happens. And I've never had to ask her to pray for me before, ever. But, like I said, at that time, we just become, I just become hyper religious. And I didn't grow up around religion or anything like that. But I had this instant knowing of, you have holy water in your bathroom out of your sink, just go pray for it and throw it on your head. And I did that, and it went away. But it lasted for 24 hours. But it gave me a day that I wasn't having that. It gave me a day to relax from it. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't go to sleep, but it gave me a break from it. But as soon as I tried to sleep again the next day, it would start happening again. And so we'd go to the ER, and I would try to go to sleep again, and it would start happening again. My body would start breaking off into convulsions, and I would try to fall asleep, And it was always right at that time when I'm trying to fall asleep. It was always in between the sleep stages, you know. And I couldn't explain it, you know. And the doctors always thought I was having a stroke, but when they'd run the tests, nothing would come up as anything. They couldn't find anything, and they ran all sorts of tests. I even had an MRI ran, and it didn't show that I had anything going on. Of course, I'm going to shorten the thing. I ended up going to the ER 3 different times, 3 different nights. One night, it happened. But this time what was different was I quit breathing, but it wasn't like I couldn't catch my breath. I didn't need to breathe. It's like my lungs no longer existed. There was no need to breathe. There was no use for lungs. It was like I was having an out-of-body experience. But it was freaking me out because I didn't understand it. You know, I was scared. I didn't understand anything. Well, finally on the about 4.5 days into it of not sleeping, I get a second friend. I've already been told by a really religious friend that, you know, of course, blame demons. Everybody blamed demons. All my religious friends blamed demons and said that I was being attacked demonically. Another friend told me that he believed I was being attacked and said that I needed to go and tell him to leave me alone. And this time I'm like, you know what? I don't care who it is. I'm just going to say, hey, I'll do anything. So I go outside in the middle of the night, and you know it's pitch dark outside, privacy fence. I'm butt naked. Probably if somebody was outside, it probably sounded like a lunatic. But I'm outside. I just look up, and it's like, listen, I don't need permission from God. And I don't need God to come down here. I don't need Jesus to come down here. I don't need the Holy Spirit to come down here. I've been ordained and anointed to tell you to get the fuck out of my body. I said, the strongest you is always going to be weaker than the weakest me. I said, I don't know why you were trying to contact me. I don't know why you were doing this. But it's not acceptable. I said, I don't understand it. Leave me alone. You're not welcomed here. You're not welcomed on my property. You're not welcomed in my children, my daughter, my stepson, my wife, my dogs, my cats, my chickens, my rabbits. You know, nothing. You're not allowed here. Leave and never come back. I was like, you're not allowed on this block. And at that point, it's never showed up again. But what's changed? What's changed drastically is from that moment on, my body vibrates. Like literally, it especially vibrates when something emotional happens or something spiritual happens, if something truth happens, you know, which, I mean, you can believe it or you can don't believe it. I mean, I don't really care. But a lot of things changed that night, you know. But before then, I really had a huge hate for Muslims because I'm like, you know, they're not, they're just evil people. They're, you know, they're out to being hateful to people, and they're doing this and that and this. But now I'm like, if I grew up in Pakistan, I'd probably be a Muslim too. I started seeing everybody as a different people. I started seeing everything differently and realizing that things aren't what they appear to be, that I may not have the answers, that my belief system may be wrong and it may be right. Who knows? All I can do is love and hope for the best. And loving people usually leads to the right answer. And that's what Jesus did. Regardless, that's what I saw him do to people. He loved every single person. I mean, the guards that were taking him prisoner. He healed the guard that Peter cut the ear off. He loved him. That's what we're supposed to do. After that 4.5 days of hell that I went through, I can't explain it. The first 20 years of my life was pure and utter hell. But then 4.5 days was a pretty close second. And it made me see how much love this world really needs. The whole reason I've got this podcast, my shirt company, everything, my whole passion for this is because I love people, because I want people to stop hurting. And it seems like nobody really gives a fuck. They just go out their merry way, do the same thing they do every day. Just bitch about everybody. That's all. They're not going to do anything else. Just bitch. After them 4.5 days of hell, I started feeling the pain that people feel. The literal pain, but I also feel the love.